Arjun's mornings were as precise as his tailored suits. He left his apartment at 7:05, walked with purposeful strides through the waking streets of Bangalore, and arrived at Café Varna by exactly 7:15. The same crosswalk, same pavement cracks, same man selling knockoff books on the corner. Routine had become a kind of armor for him, protection against chaos, against time, against himself. That morning, though, the rhythm felt slightly off. The air was unusually thick, scented not with monsoon mud or exhaust fumes, but something earthy and unfamiliar, like crushed leaves and wood smoke. The clouds were heavier than usual, hanging low over MG Road as though they might press the city into silence. As he approached the café, he noticed something strange. The usual rush of early office-goers was thinner, and the regular honking seemed muted, like someone had turned the volume of the city down. Inside, the café lights flickered once before stabilizing. The barista, a young man with a ponytail and a look of permanent indifference, was usually robotic. Today he seemed different, alert, even warm. Without waiting for Arjun to order, he handed over a black paper cup with a sticker on the lid. Korg Mist, Limited Brew. Arjun frowned slightly. He never changed his order. Never. But instead of correcting the barista, something made him take it without question. Outside, he peeled the lid open, expecting just coffee. Instead, a curl of steam hit his face with a scent so layered it seemed to vibrate. It wasn't just rich, it was haunting. Nutmeg, rain-damp soil, a faint trace of eucalyptus. He sipped and time faltered. It was like a door had been left ajar in his mind. With that first swallow, the world blurred at the edges. The taste wasn't just flavor, it was reminder. A sudden mental image. Fog rolling across a hill in Korg where he once went as a boy, a forgotten family vacation. His mother laughing with her sari soaked from a waterfall they hiked to. The clarity of that memory hit him so hard he almost dropped the cup. The second sip deepened it. His chest tightened, not unpleasantly, but as if something long dormant had stirred. A weight, perhaps, or a hunger he hadn't named. Standing there, amid the clink of spoons and idle murmurs of other early risers, Arjun felt abruptly out of sync with the life he'd built. He looked down at the cup and felt, for the first time in years, unsure of where he was going. Then, his phone buzzed. Reminder for a client call in 15 minutes. He didn't move. His hand, still holding the coffee, trembled slightly. Something had shifted. He didn't know what, but he felt it in his spine. Arjun stood at the park gate, staring at the ironwork like it was some kind of portal. He had walked past Cubbon Park hundreds of times, usually en route to meetings, earbuds in, phone buzzing with client calls. But that morning something pulled him in. His body moved before his mind could object. Inside, the early city haze lingered like breath on glass. The pathways were slick with last night's rain, puddles reflecting scattered fragments of the overcast sky. Dogs trotted ahead of their walkers. Elderly men performed Tai Chi with the slowness of drifting leaves. A woman in running shoes passed him, her ponytail swinging in rhythm. The city's usual urgency had softened here. Arjun sat on a cold, moss-streaked bench near a giant gulmohar tree. It was the kind of seat he would have ignored a day earlier. Too wet, too inconvenient. Now he barely noticed. The coffee cup, now half full, steamed gently in the cool morning. He took another sip, and again the flavor slowed him. Then, like a low hum beneath the quiet, memories stirred. Uninvited, vivid, precise. He remembered a kitchen window from his childhood in Bangalore. Filter coffee bubbling in a steel decoction filter. His mother humming an old Malayalam song as she layered dosa batter onto a sizzling tawa. His father's faint cough as he stepped out barefoot to the yard, the slap of his sandals against the damp stone. The memory was painfully ordinary, and that's what made it so piercing. It hadn't crossed his mind in years. He hadn't called home in over 6 weeks. The realization pressed on him like a weight. How much of his life had been reduced to a series of Google Calendar alerts? His existence had become a stream of tasks, performance reviews, and LinkedIn updates, each more hollow than the last. He thought about the coffee, Why this blend? Why now? The city moved on without him. In the distance, an office shuttle rolled past, filled with people like him, laptops slung over shoulders, faces already flickering with the light of their screens. For a moment, he felt invisible to them, and oddly liberated by it. He looked at his phone. 2 missed calls. A meeting reminder blinking. He turned it face down. In that moment, Arjun understood he hadn't just skipped a meeting. He had stepped off a treadmill that he wasn't even aware he had been running. His gaze drifted to the trees above. Rain droplets still clung to the leaves, some trembling, some still. He wondered which he was. Then suddenly, a gust of wind loosened a flurry of golden gulmohar petals, and they drifted down, scattered across his lap and the concrete like a silent blessing. It was still dark when Arjun woke. No alarm, no calendar buzz. Just a quiet restlessness that rose in him like a tide. The apartment felt foreign in the silence. Too neat, too sterile. The plants on his balcony were overwatered or dying. The only thing that seemed alive was the small paper bag on the kitchen counter, the one he'd taken home from Café Varna yesterday. Korg mist, it read, scrawled in smudged ink. He brewed it slowly, carefully, like a ritual, letting the aroma fill the spaces where ambition had once lived. This time he didn't go to the office. He didn't even text in an excuse. Instead, he drifted on foot through the old neighborhoods of Indiranagar, where the streets still held remnants of who he used to be. He passed a faded billboard advertising an old music festival he once attended in college. The wall behind it was peeling, revealing graffiti beneath, a skeletal hand holding a wilted flower. Somehow it made him stop. He turned a corner and found himself standing in front of his old apartment. 3rd floor, with the rusty green balcony. It had been converted into a co-working hub now, with frosted glass and QR code entry. But he could still see his old windows behind the new branding. He remembered nights when he and his roommates would argue about politics until dawn, when their biggest crisis was splitting rent or chasing freelance gigs. He stood frozen, his reflection caught in the slick glass door, watching a stranger walk by wearing his face. A security guard inside gave him a puzzled glance. Arjun nodded politely and turned away, not embarrassed but disoriented. He walked on, past the chai stall that once served as their evening think tank. It was still there, only the faces had changed. A group of young men sat around it now, laughing loudly over something on a phone screen. For a moment, he felt like he was watching a reel of his own past, but with the sound muted. Back home, a strange inertia took over. He pulled down a suitcase from his top shelf, not to pack but to open. It hadn't been touched in years. Inside he found a scattered past, college notebooks with coffee stains and scribbled ideas, a faded theater ticket from a play he had once cried at, a printed copy of a short story he never finished writing. He sat on the floor, the suitcase open like a wound, artifacts of an older self exposed. His phone lit up again. Calendar ping. Team sync at 3 p.m. He pressed dismiss without reading the details. For hours, he sat amid the remains of who he had been, his coffee growing cold beside him. He wasn't sure if this was nostalgia or grief, but it was real. More real than the pitch deck waiting on his laptop, or the endless strategy calls lined up in his inbox. He stared at the short story draft. The title read,
"The Things We Almost Became."
Arjun blinked. His throat tightened. The first thing Arjun noticed that Friday morning was the absence of smell. He stood in front of Café Varna at 7:16, expecting the now familiar waft of roasted beans and warm milk, but the air was still. The shutters were down. A handwritten note was taped to the corrugated metal in uneven letters.
"Closed due to family emergency. Will reopen soon. Varna team."
There was no date, no apology, just silence. The sidewalk felt colder than usual. Arjun didn't move. He stood staring at the note for several minutes, as if expecting it to change, to flicker with new information. People passed him on both sides, commuters with briefcases, delivery boys weaving between legs, but he was still like a statue carved in hesitation. The empty cafe was more than just a closed shop. It was a broken link in a chain he hadn't realized he had been gripping. He crossed the street without looking, sat on the low concrete ledge across from the cafe, next to a motorbike whose mirror reflected a distorted image of his face. The glass warped his features, eyes too wide, mouth thin, skin drained. He didn't recognize the man. It wasn't about the coffee anymore. He pulled out his phone and opened his calendar. It was full, color-coded blocks of meetings, deadlines, catch-ups. A familiar pride used to rise in his chest at this sight, like a soldier surveying his medals. Now it just looked like noise. Appointments with people who wouldn't notice if he disappeared, tasks that would be reassigned with 2 clicks. For the past 3 days, he hadn't answered a single work call. He hadn't even opened Slack. The strange thing was, no one had chased him. A few missed calls, a couple of polite emails asking, "Everything all right?" Then nothing. That silence stung more than any reprimand. He tapped open LinkedIn, scrolling mechanically. Promotions, new jobs, hustle manifestos. Someone from his MBA batch had made VP at a fintech company. Another had launched a startup. Arjun stared at their grinning photos. They looked driven, glowing, certain. He wasn't envious. He was displaced. Like he had stepped off a train and realized the world kept moving without him. He put the phone away and pressed his palm to his chest. Something was fluttering there. Not anxiety. Not sadness. Something else. An edge of fear.
Who am I when I'm not being productive?
He noticed a brown stain on his shirt sleeve. Coffee from the day before. He hadn't even realized. He rubbed at it absent-mindedly, then stopped. The stain wouldn't come off. A thought rose in his mind, unbidden.
How long have I been invisible to my own life?
The cafe behind him remained shut, indifferent. The absence of coffee had become a symbol, a rupture in his routine. But more than that, it was a moment of confrontation. For the first time in years he felt unmoored. And beneath the disorientation, a whisper of possibility. He stood up slowly, walked away without checking the time. Monday dawned like any other. A soft gold brushing the skyline, the usual city symphony of alarms, honking autos, and temple bells in the distance. But Arjun's apartment was quiet. Not with neglect but with intention. The phone alarm buzzed once and was silenced. The laptop remained closed on his desk, its charging light blinking idly. There was no rush to iron a shirt, no scramble to check unread messages. Instead, Arjun stood barefoot in his kitchen, watching the steam rise slowly from a stainless steel filter placed precisely on the counter. He had unearthed it the night before, from the bottom of a cluttered cabinet. His mother's old South Indian coffee filter, stained from years of use. A relic of memory. Took him over an hour to figure out how to assemble it. But when the decoction finally began dripping, thick, dark, patient, he felt something unfamiliar settle inside him. Not nostalgia. Not drama. He poured the coffee into a steel tumbler and sat cross-legged on the living room floor, back resting against a plain white wall. No music. No background noise. Just the faint hum of the city beyond the window. In front of him lay a blank notebook. Its pages clean, edges crisp. He picked up a pen and paused. The weight of it was strange after years of typing, tapping, skimming. He didn't know what he was going to write. That was the point. The coffee was different. Simpler, rougher than the cafe's polished brew. But it held something real. Something earned. It didn't transport him, it anchored him. He thought about his life, not in timelines or resumes, but in fragments. The play he never finished writing. The old camera gathering dust under his bed. The feeling of being needed, not just useful. The realization that his absence from work hadn't created a dent. And the even more frightening realization that no part of his identity truly scared anyone if he left. And yet, in this moment, he didn't feel lost. He didn't feel trapped either. He felt paused. The notebook's first page stayed blank for a long time. Then he wrote a single line, centered, deliberate.
What does it mean to begin again?
He stared at it. Not for answers but for permission. By mid-morning, he had emailed HR asking for 4 weeks of unpaid leave. Not forever. Just enough to loosen the grip. He didn't explain much. Just said he needed time. The reply came quicker than expected.
Take what you need.
It startled him how easy it was to step away. As if he'd been holding the door shut from the inside all this time. Outside, a bird landed on his balcony railing. Coal black with red eyes. Sang once sharply. Arjun looked up and smiled faintly. He took another sip of coffee, now lukewarm. The last drop clung to the rim of the tumbler before sliding down his throat. It didn't taste like escape. Tasted like return.